if you look at the euro area banks, their provisions are up, 2.5 times versus 2019 levels. You look at the UK banks, they're up 4.5 times. So there is an argument to be made that the euro area banks didn't take enough pain up front. And the US banks have always shown that is the best course of action if you want to move on and get to a recovery phase faster. I think the differences are really twofold. One is the capital position of the banks going into this crisis versus the GFC are, far, far superior. They hold 3 to 4 times more capital than they did going into the GFC. So the threat ultimately to the balance sheets is a lot lower. The other very important point is in the GFC, 2/3 of the losses came through liquidity issues. Now the central bank has become extremely au fait with pouring cold water all over liquidity issues by pumping liquidity into the system. And I think that is a very key difference, that the access to liquidity, which defined the first couple of weeks of this crisis, and then the US Fed, the ECB, the Bank of England came out and just threw liquidity at the issue, and immediately capital markets responded by coming downwards and funding became a lot easier. That took a lot longer in the GFC, and that caused a lot of the losses for the banks back then. That won't happen this time because of the way the central banks act. So I think those two things should mitigate the size of the crisis top down. Bottom up as well, the banks have been put under stress tests very, very regularly. So in Europe, or in the ECB, it's every 2 years. And in the UK, it's every year. In the US, it's every year. So the risk aversion within these banks is actually quite high because the capital charges they have to hold for having worse loans means that actually they would have to hold more capital and be less profitable. So there's been a de-risking of the books over the last 10 years. There's been an increase in capital, and the central banks have been much, much better at getting liquidity to the system. So I don't think there's a big existential threat to the system. There may be a few banks that suffer here, but the kind of existential threat that we saw in the GFC, I think is very, very unlikely to occur this time. The question really is when we come out of this, how fast do we come out of this? How much damage is there to P&Ls in terms of going back to dividend paying capacity? And the other question is, how has a lower rate environment and the fact that we've pumped so much liquidity in the system affected the profitability of the banking sector going forward?